The number one quality that we need to be hiring for today is digital curiosity. So people that are really curious about how to use technology or curious in general, so that they're really pushing the envelope and asking the questions. And that matters because you combine those things together. You've got a good strategic leader that's creating a safe space. You have the proper budget in order to be able to support the technology needs. You're simplifying things that have been overly complex for years, and you have a curious staff. Those things together, to me, Joanna, sky's the limit.
This is Associations Thrive, the podcast celebrating successful associations and their leaders. I'm your host, Joanna Pineda, CEO and Chief Troublemaker at Matrix Group International. Listen in as top association executives tell all, revealing the creative and innovative ways they're increasing membership, generating revenue, nurturing engagement, and reimagining their organizations. By the way, if you've launched a new initiative, created new member services, or updated your governance structure and are seeing great results, I want to hear your story, and so do my listeners. I'd love to have you as a guest. Go to podcast.matrixgroup.net and apply to be on Associations Thrive. Now let's dive into this week's show. Today, I'm speaking with Rebecca Achurch, founder and CEO of Achurch Consulting. Rebecca, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Joanna. Thrilled to be here.
Rebecca, tell us about Achurch.
Sure. Achurch Consulting is a consulting firm that focuses on helping associations and nonprofits design, select, implement, and adopt their technology. So this means we're a team of IT strategists, project managers, and business analysts who will help an organization determine their tech needs, develop a roadmap, and then help them select technology that's right-sized for their organizations. But what really sets us apart and is at the heart of what we do is then we stick around and we help organizations implement and adopt their new technology. I think it's important to be clear that we're not actually the implementation partner in the traditional sense. What we do is actually work beside the association to help them be successful. So we serve as their project manager and business analyst and advocate. So we'll help drive a project, we'll help facilitate decisions, and then we try to help set them up for long-term success.
Rebecca, my team had a chance to work with your team, and we had a very successful partnership working with the Fertilizer Institute. And you and your team helped manage the redesign of TFI.org. It was a big project. We were consolidating 5 sites. There was a whole lot of transformation, rebranding. Why do organizations like a TFI need a company like Achurch to manage the projects or develop new policies, for example?
Well, most organizations, most associations have fewer than 50 staff. Not many of those have full-time project managers or business analysts on their team. And that's hard. They're focused on doing the work that provides value to the members. They're experts in their association. They're experts in their members' needs. They're not necessarily experts in what it takes to successfully run a project, a technology project at that, and making the changes along the way. So our specialty is client-side project management. We fill the gap of those project managers and business analysts who, dare I say, have been there, done that, and have the t-shirt. I mean, this is what we do for a living all day, every day. So we can help people see around the corner. We can help them make decisions in the light. And that's really our focus. So they need us because they need to focus on what's important to their members. And we can help backfill the work of running the project. And that's what we do. That's why they need us.
I see. So an organization that maybe doesn't have a project management office, for example, or doesn't really have a cadre of project managers, you fill in.
Yes.
So, Rebecca, you're involved in these projects. It might be related to implementing a new membership database or redesigning a website. Your team is very involved, and then the engagement ends. So, how do you make sure that the organization develops this capacity to be able to do it on their own now that you've left? Because maybe some of them keep you on, but not everybody can afford it. So, how do you make sure that you've really enabled the organization?
That's a fantastic question. It's true that we do tend to stay with our clients for a long time in a varying degree of levels of effort, sometimes nearly nothing, and sometimes at very high velocity. So, what do we do to help them? It's change management disguised as project management.
Ah,
We don't go in and say we are change management specialists. But what we know about technology implementations, or most technology implementations today, is that really what it's taking for them to be successful in the long term are behavior changes. So they need to build new cadences in the way they work. They need to have conversations potentially that they haven't had in a very long time. So part of what we try to do during the implementation is bring them into those conversations, bring them into the fold, meet them where they are, allow them to see us working differently, behaving differently, modeling that, and then they begin to model those behaviors as well. So the success in the end, we do other things that are very tactical. We do training, we do SOPs. They're very tactical things that go along with that. But really what it is, especially in today's technology that is mostly SaaS-based and constantly evolving and changing, which is very different than what they had 10 years ago, it's really helping them build new muscle memory to be successful. So we put in and we help them create those processes. That's part of what we do. The second thing we do is begin to build conversations and bridges and relationships within the organization that perhaps haven't existed before. So the right hand knows what the left hand's doing, especially with AMS implementations. It's amazing how many times people will really not know that someone in an organization is doing something very similar to what they're doing, and it's duplicative in effort, or they had no idea something was happening at all. So what we try to do is create that transparency. Then we behave differently, and then we put in new muscle memory and systems and processes for them to be successful in the long run.
boy, this is amazing. And Rebecca, I saw it during the TFI project where you and your team would facilitate conversations about who needs to be in the meeting so that then they're developing almost the expertise to know who does what and who should be involved in what. And then I know there were some meetings where you weren't there and sometimes your team wasn't there, and yet things still happened.
Well, that's great to hear. Good.
Well, we're actually working with TFI on a bunch of projects that you're not involved in, but we can see that the experience from the redesign really gave them the confidence, the cadence, and the expertise to be able to do it. So nice work.
Well, we really believe that good project management is good change management.
Mm.
They really go together because you're communicating well, you're communicating clearly what's going on. So things are not unexpected. They know what's about to happen. So really change management, good change management and good project management go together. So we see those as kissing cousins.
Rebecca, I want to hear about your experience with associations and the things that they're doing to thrive. But before we do that, I want to talk about your journey. So how do you get to become founder and CEO of your own consulting firm? What inspired you to make the leap?
Some may say I'm a little crazy. I say I'm having the time of my life. And it all started when my husband was transferred up to Washington, D.C., and I became a meeting planner at the National Spa and Pool Institute.
Ah.
I worked for the most amazing woman, Molly Finney, and she taught me so much about the industry. And frankly, I fell in love. That was at the beginning of the internet when we still had DSL and dial-up. And we were just beginning to use the internet as a tool to facilitate member services, to facilitate efficiencies. And the phrase I always say, I was young enough and naive enough to say yes when I probably should have said no, but I loved the learning. And so she allowed me to really push the envelope on some technology projects, like implementing an AMS, like doing logic-based registration, like putting our housing online. And that was really the catalyst. Fast forward, I end up at the American Chemical Society, which is really the bulk of my career in the association space. And it was an amazing place to learn really the discipline of project management, the importance of understanding the business, and the dedication to the industry. I learned so much there. I was their AMS program manager, and we went from a homegrown AMS and went to a commercial off the shelf in early 2008. And it really did change my life. We had 35 people on the team, probably. It was a major implementation, and I was fully involved with the business. I was never a technologist up until that point. I was a person who could translate. And so what I saw as I was ending my tenure at ACS with the emergence of cloud-based computing and SaaS-based technologies, that the way we were implementing technology was going to change. How people use technology was going to change. And I could see that. And I knew that we were not prepared as associations to really absorb what was going to happen. We didn't have the capacity. So Achurch was founded on taking some of what I did at ACS around best practices, around building capacity, around being able to scale, around velocity, around creating frameworks, and picking those up and porting those over to associations that don't have the benefit of the resources that ACS did. I mean, I headed up a program. It's a wonderfully well-funded organization. And I saw many organizations that just couldn't afford that. So our mission is to help people get through those technology transitions and be successful in the long run. So that was the genesis and why I'm so passionate about really helping associations be successful. I know the heavy lift it takes. I know the time commitment it takes. And that was the genesis.
Well, Rebecca, it's a leap to go from working for an association and developing a lot of knowledge to striking out on your own, hiring staff, and saying, I'm going to be an industry partner. It's a leap, and you got to have some faith. So what was that like mentally, and was it scary?
Great question as well. What I didn't share is that I come from multiple generations of entrepreneurs. Both of my grandparents owned their own businesses. So I will say it runs a little in the blood. And you're right, it did take a leap of faith, but I felt passionately that there was a gap in the market, that there wasn't an organization that was really fulfilling this need, that was focused on the client's need. We are not the implementer. We're really focused in on the client side, which was a different offering that I really saw out there. Yes, it's risky, but I'm known to be a risk taker. So I threw caution to the wind and said, let's see what happens and let's see if it sticks. And it did.
Well, congratulations. Achurch Consulting is now 9 years old.
Thank you very much.
Amazing. Hey, let's turn to associations. You manage different types of projects, different size projects. We're post-pandemic.
Yes.
How do you manage projects today in a hybrid world?
Oh, that's a great question. One of the benefits of my history, my journey, is that I was one of the first people at the American Chemical Society to work in a permanent remote position. The big projects that I was running at ACS, I was remote the entire time. Much of our team and the people that are at Achurch Consulting today actually are some of those colleagues that I had. So we had an early start on what it took to run a hybrid project. But really what it takes at the foundation is, frankly, trust. So in our implementations, we take a really deliberate approach to creating strong connections early on in a hybrid environment. You actually have to take time to get to know the people you're working with. it is an investment that pays dividends time and time again because you're able to have candid conversations about maybe when things are not going right or not going as well as expected. You can have conversations that are different. So trust sits at the very beginning of being successful in a hybrid environment.
Well, let me ask you to be more specific here.
Sure.
And we're talking hybrid. Is there a formula for being in person versus being all on Zoom when you're managing projects? And are there some best practices for that?
I don't believe that there's a direct formula. I think that there are times that when things are not going right, you need to go on site, you need to meet in person. If we have our perfect world, so if I could say in my perfect world, this is what it would look like, we would meet in person at the beginning and then we would go hybrid.
Okay.
We don't always get the luxury of that. So we work in other ways to develop trust. So in terms of best practices, I would always want to meet with the client in person first so that we could break bread. We can have a conversation. We can look at body language. We can understand communication styles. Without being able to do that, which most of the time we cannot, we have to start by one-on-one conversations or small group conversations. So we believe that in hybrid, you would set the table with a group conversation, set expectations, break it down into smaller conversations, small groups, or one-on-one. And that's how you can begin to establish trust in a hybrid environment. And then you can move from there. The second element, after you have trust, is really creating transparent frameworks. So much of what happens in a project is people just don't know. And in the absence of information, frankly, people make things up. And so we work really hard to have a cadence to communication to make sure that decisions are transparent, conversations are transparent. That really matters.
Yeah.
Because people know that they're heard. They can not only feel that they're heard, they can see that they're heard. There's actual evidence. So those are the two key elements in running hybrid projects that we think are absolutely must. You can't just dive into the details without understanding how people operate.
That's some really good advice, regardless of whether you're working with a consultant. Even if it's strictly an internal project, it's probably a good idea, if you can, to have an in-person meeting just so that everybody can see the whites of the eyes and, like you said, break bread and get to know each other as people.
100%. I mean, it's such an important element to know each other as humans before we dive into things that are difficult. Being able to relate matters.
Yeah. Rebecca, you said something really provocative at the start of this interview. You said that what Achurch does is change management described as technology. And when I think about change management, I think about preparing the organization for the now and the future. So what are 3 things that associations need to be doing to prepare themselves for the future?
I think the first thing that we need to do as executive leaders within an association is we need to begin to create a really safe space for staff to begin to experiment. I don't want to make this podcast about AI. I get tired of talking about AI. So this is the only time we're going to mention it. But that does mean beginning to play a little with tools and techniques and AI and a whole bunch of other things that allow us to see how we could move our organization forward. What's out there? We have to understand what is out there and how we could use it to meet our members. So that safe space that may not be successful, okay, but we've got to experiment. We've got to try some things. We're not going to risk the organization, but we've got to have a little space to do some experimentation. The second thing is we really do need to look at that old technology. It's holding you back. And we see this a lot of times where the investments haven't been made. So we need to really begin to properly budget for technology in an ongoing fashion. Our capital expenses are going down on this front. It's much more operational. I know that's hard, but we really do need to begin to budget properly for what technology advancements we need. Along with that is being flexible. So in SaaS-based technology, we're getting commercial off-the-shelf packages. Yes, you can configure them, but I see organizations that are getting really serious about simplifying processes being more successful. They're really asking themselves, do I need to do it this way, or can I be flexible? And the fewer customizations and the fewer complex configurations you have, the better velocity you can have and the more flexibility you can have to serve your members in the future. And finally, the third thing is I would say it's all about your staff. And I think the number one quality that we need to be hiring for today is digital curiosity. So people that are really curious about how to use technology or curious in general, so that they're really pushing the envelope and asking the questions. And that matters because you combine those things together. You've got a good strategic leader that's creating a safe space. You have the proper budget in order to be able to support the technology needs. You're simplifying things that have been overly complex for years, and you have a curious staff. Those things together, to me, Joanna, sky's the limit. And those are the associations that I see are really soaring.
Rebecca, before we close out, what I'm hearing from you is that association leaders also have to be tech leaders, and they need to be mindful of how technology is really powering the organization, but also influencing what they're capable of. So what would you say to a CEO who says, I'm not tech savvy at all?
I don't think that they need to be tech savvy. They need to have an openness to technology, not necessarily be tech savvy. They can find a good partner, a thought partner to help with that versus them knowing the technology. I do not think that CEOs have to be tech experts. I think they need to understand how tech is influencing their industry and their organization, and they have to have an open mind to how they can use technology to move it forward. I think it's a little bit different. I don't think they're tech leaders, but they have to be inspired by tech and they have to not be scared of tech.
Rebecca, this was amazing advice to association leaders who really want to lead their organizations into the future. I want to thank you for everything that you have shared today. And I hope you'll come back in the future and tell us more stories about associations that are absolutely killing it.
I'd love to, Joanna, anytime. Thanks for the invite.
Thanks for listening to Associations Thrive. We're so glad to have you here. My personal mission and the mission of my company, Matrix Group International, is to help associations and nonprofits increase membership, generate revenue, and thrive in the digital space. I want to hear stories of how your organization is thriving in today's challenging landscape. Please apply to be on my show by going to podcast.matrixgroup.net. By the way, do you need help with a digital initiative? Maybe it's a website redesign, a new membership database, or a hybrid meeting that you're planning. I'd love to connect with you. Please visit the Matrix Group website at matrixgroup.net. Thanks again for listening to this week's episode of Associations Thrive. Don't forget to subscribe to the show, leave a 5-star rating, post a comment, and share it with your colleagues and friends. Bye!